Next on Unsolved Mysteries, a businessman forks over $30,000 for a horse and then disappears. His bones are found almost 20 years later. What happened? Two models on two different photo shoots are found dead in the same area. Is it the work of the same killer? 6 people are murdered, all for no apparent reason. The police are baffled. Who is the killer? Finally, a family says that the farmhouse they just bought is haunted, so they're suing the previous owners. What do you think the court will decide? These are stories you won't want to miss. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. Here at Unsolved Mysteries, we receive a lot of viewer mail. One of those letters was from a man with an unusual request. He was experiencing strange premonitions which he simply couldn't explain. They were about a murder, and he asked us to look into the case. Independence, Missouri. Tyrone Rollins was hired as a school bus driver. From the beginning, he had an eerie feeling about the rocky outcroppings behind the bus yard.
I'd be sitting up in front of my bus and I'd feel like somebody watching me from behind, and I'd look back there and there wouldn't be nobody on the bus. For a while there, I just thought I was going crazy. This is a strong feeling, like some pulling inside me, wanting me to do something, and I just couldn't figure out what it was.
Finally, Tyrone gave in. He simply had to investigate the north side of the hill. There, he discovered a hidden cave.
That strong feeling was back again. I knew I had to go in there for some reason. It was like an amazing adrenaline rush. Just the feeling of being in there, I didn't know if it was from not knowing what was in there. When I shined my flashlight towards the rocks, you could see little tiny specks look like crystals. So I started examining the rocks, and it was just then that I happened to glance over and I seen a pair of boots. I was just shocked. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Dental records confirmed that the remains were those of Gary Simmons, a businessman from Overland Park, Kansas, 25 miles away. An autopsy showed that he was shot in the head. Tyrone's incredible discovery became a nightmare for the police. They were confronted with a killing that happened 17 years earlier. An investigation seemed almost pointless, but the police had no choice. Gary Simmons was dead, and whoever killed him was still on the loose. Gary had owned and operated a lucrative chain of gas stations. His hobby was horse trading.
Yeah, beautiful horse.
Gary always worked hard. I believe he got involved in horses in order to have a form of relaxation and a means of doing something that was fun with his family.
How you doing? Just got back from a show down in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Man, I saw some of the most beautiful horses I've seen in a long time.
Is that right?
You bet.
Anything I might be interested in?
The day before he disappeared, Gary learned of a prized horse for sale.
You know Tom Dixon?
Tom Dixon. Yeah?
He had one of the most beautiful purebred Appaloosas I've seen in a long time. Raised him from a colt.
How much is he asking for him?
He's asking $30,000 for him.
Hi, can I help you?
Yeah, I'm here to see Mr. Simmons.
Do you have an appointment?
Yeah, we talked earlier on the phone.
And your name, please?
Tom Dixon.
It was the beginning of a mysterious encounter which lasted all day and which police are still trying to piece together.
Excuse me, Gary, there's a Tom Dixon here to see you.
Oh, sure. Hi, Gary.
A little while later, he left his office with Dixon.
Okay, I'll follow you. Sure. It's a great horse. You're gonna love it.
Gary told his secretary that he would return shortly, but he didn't say where he was going. 15 minutes later, he called in and asked his secretary to write a check to Tom Dixon for $30,000.
Okay, 30,000. Hi, can I help you with something?
Yeah, I'm here to pick up a check.
30 minutes later, Dixon picked up the check and walked out of the office.
Yes, he did, and I've drawn up the check, but you're gonna have to get Gary's signature on it.
Dixon then took the check to Gary Simmons for his signature, but no one knows where that meeting took place. Later, Gary was spotted at a truck stop 10 miles from his office.
The owner saw Gary Simmons walking back and forth between the counter and the window. He remembers that Gary Simmons was alone and there did not seem to be anybody with him or waiting with him.
It was the last time anyone saw Gary alive. Just before noon, Dixon showed up at Gary's bank.
Gary Simmons had called the president of the bank and had informed him that Tom Dixon was on his way to cash the check. The bank president recognized Gary Simmons' voice, and he did not recognize anything unusual in his voice to raise his suspicions either.
Around 5 hours later, Dixon was seen at a salvage yard 11 miles from the bank. He was driving Gary's Lincoln Continental.
Where'd you get that Lincoln?
It's not my car. It's something I need to get rid of. I was wondering if you could use your machine to sort of crush it for me.
Yeah, I can make it flat for you. But you want to get rid of it, you're going to have to melt it. The Fed's been keeping a real close eye on the furnace.
You got any better ideas?
Yeah. Put a brick on the accelerator and drive it in the Missouri River.
Hey, thanks for the advice.
The following day, one of Tom Dixon's friends dropped him off at a truck stop near Kansas City. Dixon said that he was catching a ride with a cross-country trucker.
All right, we're ready to go, guys.
No one has seen Tom Dixon since. 6 months went by. Gary Simmons' Lincoln Continental was pulled from the Missouri River, less than 6 miles from the salvage yard where Dixon tried to get rid of it.
All you had was 2 grown men that had disappeared, and that happens every day in America. It was unknown whether they had disappeared and not wanted to be found, or if foul play had indeed occurred. Upon finding Gary Simmons' body, it became a homicide investigation.
Police suspected that Gary was the victim of a bogus horse deal, that Dixon, acting alone or with a partner, stole his money and killed him. Then, during the filming of this story, a new witness came forward.
Oh, Gary knew a horse, that's for sure. He knew what a good horse was, and...
Roy Hilton is a local rancher. He says that he knew both Gary Simmons and Tom Dixon. He claimed that he heard Gary calling his office and the bank from the Whispering Downs Horse Ranch on the day he disappeared.
Yeah, $30,000.
Roy also said that Gary showed him the horse that he was buying.
This murder didn't come down over a $30,000 horse deal. It had to come down on some black market gas. I'm almost positive of that because Gary Simmons was having a problem getting fuel for his stations.
Roy Hilton's testimony complicated an already confusing case. Gary was struggling to save his chain of gas stations in the face of soaring oil prices the year before his death.
Gary closed the bulk of his stations because of lack of gasoline. After Gary disappeared, there was numerous rumors that Gary might have been involved in black market gasoline.
Who murdered Gary Simmons and why? A premonition? A horse trade gone bad? Black market gasoline? There may be only one man who knows: Tom Dixon. This photograph has been aged to show how Tom Dixon might look today. He is 5 feet 8 inches tall, with brown or graying hair and green eyes. He may be working as a house painter or general contractor. If you have any information about Tom Dixon or the murder of Gary Simmons, please log on to our website at unsolved.com. Next, 2 beautiful models are found murdered 2 years apart. Could it have been the same killer? In the vast Angeles National Forest of Southern California, 2 bodies are discovered at different times. Both victims appear to be models, and both were reportedly connected to a photographer named Charles Rathburn. The similarities are eerie, and investigators are wondering if this is the handiwork of one killer. Kimberly Pandeleos was a 20-year-old aspiring model and actress. She was married and had a 14-month-old son. She told her husband that she had been booked to model at an outdoor photo shoot in the Angeles National Forest. Authorities believed she responded to an ad in a local newspaper. Kimberly's torched car was found the following day near the Monte Cristo campground in the park. A search of the area didn't turn up any clues. Detectives were stumped, and the case went cold. Flash forward 1 year. The LA County coroner was called to investigate human bones that had been found in the Angeles National Forest. Using dental records, the coroner identified the remains as those of Kimberly. 2 years later, it was a model shoot that also lured 27-year-old Linda Sobek to Angeles National Forest. Linda was a successful model and a former Los Angeles Raiders cheerleader. Her family and friends were frantic when a few days passed and no one heard from her. Police began to focus on Charles Rathburn after they found his signature on a car rental agreement in the area of the photo shoot. He claimed that Linda Sobek died in a freak car accident during the shoot. He said he panicked and that he buried her. Days later, Rathburn helped police find Linda's body. It was just 5 miles from where Kimberly's body had been found. The coroner reported Linda's injuries were not caused by a car. Update. Charles Rathburn has been charged with first-degree murder. Rathburn was so distraught that he tried to kill himself before the trial. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. With the conclusion of the Sobek murder trial, police now focused on tying Rathburn to Kimberly's murder.
We do have some similarities between the death of Kimberly Pandeleos and Linda Sobek. We also have a person who has come forward and indicated that they saw Kimberly Pandeleos in the company of Charles Rathburn inside a Denny's restaurant shortly before her murder.
Investigators tried, but were unable to link Rathburn to the case. And then they finally got the break they needed. Update. A new witness came forward with information proving that these cases, although similar, were not connected. Manya Sensu told police that her boyfriend, David Rademacher, had repeatedly talked about Kimberly's murder. He also threatened to hurt her the same way he hurt Kimberly if she broke up with him. With Manya's cooperation, the police secretly recorded conversations between Manya and Rademacher. These calls and other evidence led to his arrest. Rademacher was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In Sacramento, California, police respond to reports of shots being fired at a convenience store.
44 Edward 2, I got a man down at the parking lot. Need code 3 analyst.
What we found is that we, in fact, had a triple shooting. A customer had been shot outside the front door. 2 clerks had been shot behind the counter. In looking at the scene, we had the feeling that there probably was very little conversation between this shooter and his victims, and that it appeared he walked in the store, maybe had not said anything to him, and simply started shooting, and they were all headshots. The one thing that really struck us immediately was that it was more an execution, not a robbery. It seemed like the primary motive for whoever the shooter was in that case went in there to kill people.
35-year-old Stephen Anderson, a store employee, was dead. Anderson was the father of 3 young sons. 2 other people were mortally wounded, an employee, Zaid Ahmad Obeid, and a customer, 42-year-old Thor Johnson Sr. Investigators had no eyewitnesses.
There wasn't too much to go on. The killer's identity was a complete mystery. None of the victims were gang members, and very little money was taken. The detective's first step was to look through the cash receipts from the night of the killings.
Late that evening, a woman left the store after buying a magazine. Apparently, the next customer was the gunman. He bought 2 99-cent items. His sales were rung up, but never totaled. A customer, Thor Johnson, came to the store just seconds before the killer left. Johnson was shot in the back of the head.
The biggest feeling we take away from that is just that it was very cold-blooded, very unnecessary, and we were really concerned that, are we looking for somebody who may do this again?
Can I help you? You want some money? Hey.
Then, exactly 1 week to the hour after the convenience store murders, the killer struck again. This time, he targeted a pizza parlor less than 1 mile from the convenience store. 3 employees were closing the restaurant. The victims were 18-year-old Sarah Cook and 19-year-old Kyle Reynolds, 2 local college students, and 30-year-old ANDREA COLADANGELO. Once again, investigators were left with 3 victims, but not a single eyewitness.
The second event at the pizza parlor only confirmed our worst fears. Instead of any kind of traditional motive murder, now we were probably dealing with more of a psychological motive. The obvious psychological motive being that here we had a guy who killed because he likes to kill. He was getting a thrill out of killing.
Ballistics reports confirmed that the same weapon, a small caliber pistol, was used at both murder scenes.
The person committing these crimes has little sophistication about weapons. You'd get the feeling that it may be someone who may even be a younger person, borrowing the weapon from daddy's nightstand or something of that sort of nature.
Update. After we first broadcast this story, 22-year-old Eric Royce Leonard was arrested for the 6 murders. Incredibly, Leonard tried to execute all of the possible witnesses. But his attempts failed, and the people who saw him near the crime scene identified him as the killer. Police found a .25 caliber Beretta in Leonard's father's house. Ballistics test proved that this was the gun used in all 6 murders. Leonard was convicted on multiple murder charges and sent to death row, where he remains today. Next, debris from an ancient ship is found frozen in a Turkish glacier. Some believe that it's part of Noah's Ark.
We've all heard of Noah's Ark. It's one of the best-known stories in the Bible. And while some people say that it's only a tale, others insist that it's not only true, but that there is proof. They claim that physical evidence of Noah's Ark has been found on Mount Ararat.
Mount Ararat. According to the Bible, the area where Noah's Ark came to rest after the Great Storm. It's a desolate area, rising above the headwaters of the Tigris River. In recent years, several expeditions have explored the Ararat Mountains, and incredibly, 2 separate teams believe that they may have found the Ark in 2 different locations just 17 miles apart. One of the sites is on Mount Ararat's northeast side under a permanent 23-square-mile glacier. A Turkish businessman named George Hagopian said that when he was a young boy in 1906, he saw Noah's Ark wedged in a melted part of the glacier. Hagopian described the vessel to archaeological illustrator Alfred Lee.
He said it looked like a long box, It's rectangular, and the corners were kind of rounded a little bit. The sides sloped in slightly. The roof, he said, was basically flat with just a slight pitch to it. And there was a stair kind of apparatus at one end. His uncle hoisted him up onto this ladder, and he walked on up onto the roof. And there, all the way down the middle of the roof, he saw these holes. And he stuck his head in, and it was dark. He shouted, and his voice echoed and re-echoed inside. It was hollow. George Hagopian went back a couple years later, saw the same thing, but ice and snow were beginning to cover it up again.
17 years later, Alfred Lee met Ed Davis, who was stationed in Iran with the United States Army. Davis said that he also had seen the Ark.
When Ed Davis started talking, the hair on the back of my head just stood up because I could hear an echo of George Hagopian from years before.
Ed Davis's sighting occurred in roughly the same area as George Hagopian's. However, when Davis saw what he thought was the Ark, it had broken in two.
We waited a while, and the fog kind of lifted, and it shone through kind of a funnel, and it showed the Ark in the end. You could see in the end of it, and we saw both parts. You stand there with your mouth wide open.
Ed Davis described 3 decks inside and large cages on the bottom deck, smaller cages on the second deck, and on the roof, a venting system with many holes so that you could see how the light and ventilation could go clear to the bottom deck.
In this illustration, Alfred Lee reconciled the two accounts. The intact Ark is George Hagopian's sighting in 1906, and below are the 2 pieces described by Ed Davis. Although Hagopian and Davis weren't able to pinpoint the exact locations, their stories intrigued amateur archaeologist Don Shockey.
I can't think of anything more exciting that I could be doing in my lifetime than having a small part in seeing this, whatever it is, verified. And we have good reason to believe there's something there. We got to prove it.
Don Shockey launched an expedition to Mount Ararat after studying classified U.S. satellite photos. For 3 days, Don and his guides climbed up the mountain's south side.
Our whole goal was to get to the spot, over the top, down the glaciers to this particular location and verify what the satellite information had told us.
The Turkish government prevented them from traveling to the north side. So Ahmet, a Turkish guide, continued on by himself. Ahmet crested Mount Ararat and started down the north slope. At an elevation of nearly 16,000 feet, he spotted something half buried in the snow. From a distance of 300 yards, he took this photograph, which seems to show the end of a rectangular object with a peaked roof.
He came back and I said, "Is anything showing?" He said, "A coop, a coop." And I said, "What are you talking about, Ahmet?" "A coop, like a chicken coop." "Oh, it's kind of at a pointed top," and he said that you could see the outline of it in the side. He said, "In all of my years, he had never seen anything like it." He said, "There's some artifact there."
Don Shockey believed that Ahmet might have glimpsed the remains of Noah's Ark. Shockey returned to the States and took the photograph to forensic anthropologist Dr. Jim EBERT.
It certainly does not look natural. It looks very strikingly man-made to me. What I see when I look at this is something that stands out from the rest of the terrain, and that is what looks like a solid structure. You'll never know until you get up there and can see it and stand next to it.
Shockey returned to Mount Ararat and studied the mountain from the air. Unfortunately, the site was now covered by snow. Shockey stopped his search, but remained convinced that he might have found the resting place of Noah's Ark. Others disagreed.
We've been told for years that Noah's Ark is on top of Mount Ararat because that's what the Bible says, and that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says the Ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. That word is in the plural.
David FASOLD was a former merchant marine officer and merchant salvage expert. He believes that the Ark was buried here, a full 17 miles south of Mount Ararat. FASOLD's team searched the area and discovered traces of iron, which do not appear to be natural deposits.
Every 20 to 30 inches, approximately, we have the remains of an iron fitting or an iron pin of sorts that are still there in the soil and discernible. Well, this is one of 5,400 iron fittings that we've located. Of course, we haven't pulled them all out of the boat. It's been cut in half by a diamond saw, scanned by electron microscopes at Los Alamos National Laboratory, and this particular iron fitting is 94.84% man-made wrought iron.
Looking at the mound from above, the iron deposits form a distinct pattern of intersecting lines, which FASOLD believes is the framework of the Ark. The boat's length is 515 feet, and the width averages 85 feet, the same measurements recorded in the Bible.
Given the shape of the thing and the size of the thing and where they found it, I mean, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck until somebody finds something else, what else could it possibly be but Noah's Ark?
Are the metal fittings remnants of Noah's Ark? Some have suggested that David FASOLD found the remains of an ancient Mongol fort. Others say it's a geological formation. However, the Turkish government has declared the mound the official site where Noah's Ark rests.
The man who is in charge, Professor Salih Bayraktutan, who is also a geologist, he says it's Noah's Ark 200%. It is not a geological anomaly, it's a man-made structure.
Has one of mankind's greatest mysteries finally been solved on this remote mountain range? It's obvious that there needs to be more exploration and analysis before we'll know the answer. But for now, Noah's Ark remains an intriguing and elusive unsolved mystery. Next, a 21-year-old college student is missing after a night of partying. Who's responsible for her disappearance? One spring afternoon in Coushatta, Louisiana, Carol and Luke Long received a call from a friend of their 21-year-old daughter, Wendy.
Good. Listen, I have Wendy's car. I just want to know how to get it back to you guys.
Where's Wendy?
Hi, honey.
Wendy drove to Shreveport to shop and to party with her friends for the weekend. Her parents expected her home by Sunday afternoon. Instead, they received the news that Wendy had disappeared.
I thought she was with you.
No, I haven't seen her since Friday night.
We called the police and told them that we thought something had happened to Wendy. And that's where it all started. Somebody knows where Wendy's at, and we just want to find her so bad.
Wendy Long had taken a semester off from college and planned to return in the fall. At the time of her disappearance, she was living with her parents.
One of her flaws may have been that she's too trusting. She thought everybody she met was her friend. She was one of those people that made friends with everybody.
Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetie. Oh, you look cute.
Shortly after noon, Wendy left her parents' home, driving her own car, and headed to Shreveport, 50 miles from Coushatta. On the way, she picked up two friends from Natchitoches. After an afternoon of shopping, the three picked up another friend, Tommy, who lived in the Shreveport area.
Nothing. How's it going?
Later that evening, they arrived at a Shreveport party.
There was drinking at the party, and I'm told that Wendy'd had quite a bit to drink that night. So that when it came time for them to take Tommy back home, she didn't want to drive. In fact, she didn't want to go with them at all. She decided to stay where she was.
Are you okay to drive?
Fine.
Her two friends that she came to Shreveport with drove Tommy back to where he was staying at the time.
After dropping Tommy off, Wendy's friends got into trouble.
Their statement is that they went to get some food and they were stopped by a state trooper, and one of the friends was arrested for DWI and taken to the Benton jail.
Tommy told the police that he was concerned that Wendy might be stranded at the party. So he drove his own car back to the party and picked Wendy up. On the way to Coushatta, he stopped for gas and a quart of oil.
When he came back out of the gas station, Wendy was talking to two young men in a black Chevy truck.
Hey, Tommy, come here. This is Mike and Zant.
Tommy said that it appeared that she knew them, and Wendy told Tommy at that point not to worry about it, that she was going to go with them and they were going to get her home.
Are you sure you know these guys?
Yes, I'm sure I know these guys. I will get home okay. Just go home.
All right. Tommy said that was the last time that he saw Wendy. Tommy agreed to take a polygraph test, which he passed.
Tommy did extremely well on the polygraph. The polygraph examiner himself was very impressed with him and the details that he could remember. At that point, they decided that it would be beneficial to hypnotize Tommy to see what else he could remember.
Under hypnosis, Tommy provided a more detailed description of the black Chevy pickup truck and the two men. A police artist produced these sketches, but no one came forward to identify them. On the day after Wendy vanished, her ex-boyfriend claimed that he received a message from Wendy on his answering machine.
Hey, Mark, this is Wendy. This is a really bad connection. Hear me? Hello?
He said that it sounded like she was on a cell phone and he didn't hear everything that she said. He did clearly hear the words, "This is Wendy." He said the rest of it was very staticky and he erased the message. At that time, he didn't even know that Wendy was missing.
Wendy Long's missing persons case is filled with many more questions than answers. A key question involved another of Wendy's ex-boyfriends.
Just tell me who you were with last Friday night.
There are quite a few reports that indicate that there was some physical violence in between them.
No!
The thing that concerns me about Wendy's ex-boyfriend is the fact that another girlfriend of his came up missing years prior to this, and that she was never found.
But Wendy's ex-boyfriend apparently had an alibi.
The boyfriend cannot be placed in Shreveport anytime that Friday or Saturday. I consider him to be suspect only because of the prior things that happened.
For Wendy Long's parents, the nightmare that began with a single phone call continued.
We've had people call and said that they've been praying for us and praying for Wendy. I'm just trusting God to answer our prayers and to lead us to wherever Wendy might be.
Update. 5 months after Wendy's disappearance, a surprising development. Tommy, whose real name is Robert Stewart, was arrested for check fraud. Police asked more questions. They focused on the inconsistencies in the story that he had told about the last time that he saw Wendy Long. Investigators said that Robert Stewart, alias Tommy, eventually broke down, confessed to the murder, and pinpointed the location of Wendy's body. Stewart pled guilty to the rape and murder of Wendy Long and was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Next, it seemed like the classic English farmhouse, an oasis of peace and quiet. And then the nightmare began. In the beautiful English countryside sits Lowe's Cottage, a 250-year-old farmhouse that some say leaves its guests with an impression that is quite haunting.
It's very frightening. We think the place is haunted. We've seen ghosts, we've had articles thrown about, we've seen candles move.
All the time, the inside of your stomach's churning up, expecting something to happen. Even when it's quiet, you're still on edge.
The Smiths are not only scared, they're also angry. They're suing the former owners for selling them a haunted house, and the former owners are countersuing. They say the Smiths are making the whole thing up so they don't have to pay for the house. And now a court must decide, is the house really haunted?
Andrew Smith and his wife Josie moved their family to an old farmhouse in the village of Upper Mayfield. They thought that it would be the perfect place to raise their 2 children.
About 6 weeks after we'd moved in, we noticed things happening.
But if you stand over here, it's really cold.
You'd walk into our bedroom and the temperature would be a couple of degrees lower than the rest of the house. A definite temperature drop. The rooms, you could never really see the ceiling. There was always this hazy. It was always hazy.
But the former owners, 2 sisters who grew up in the cottage, say that they never experienced anything out of the ordinary.
Our parents, myself and my sister, never saw any ghosts or heard any strange noises or anything associated with the paranormal. I don't think it's haunted. I lived there for about 25 years, never saw anything, heard anything.
But the Smiths insisted that living there was a nightmare.
You get this feeling when you're in the room that if this thing was a person, with its little finger, it could flick you straight across the room.
One night, we stayed awake till about 3 in the morning, then we just fell asleep through exhaustion. And within minutes of us falling asleep, I felt this pressure on my throat, strangling me.
When Josie was being strangled, that's what you call fear. That made my hair shoot straight up.
One night I was in the kitchen that was downstairs. It was about 8 o'clock at night, and I turned round and I saw this young girl. She had the old gathered top with the bodice on the gathered skirt, and I thought, oh, there's somebody outside. It wasn't until I thought about it that I realised that I could see the window frame through her.
The former owner, Sandra Podmore, says, no way.
That's rubbish, absolute rubbish. We never saw any ghosts, no unusual happenings. There was nothing flying around rooms. There was no vile smells and mists. Nothing at all.
The Smiths, however, were worried that they were up against some sort of demon.
We have requests that come from individuals who are very deeply upset to people who have buildings that are causing them problems, various smells, apparitions, anything really that is to do with the supernatural. Lowe's Cottage comes out fairly near the top of the list of this.
The Smiths then asked the Reverend Montford to bless their home.
To rid this house of all evil.
After the vicar blessed the place, the house just lit up everywhere. It just seemed so light. When you see the reaction to a prayer in the house, that's when you're kind of really amazed, and there's no 2 ways about it. There is definitely something.
The Smiths believed the vicar's prayers would finally bring them peace. But later that evening,
What are you doing? I don't know. Perhaps you left the timer on. Oh, God. I'm going to switch it off, eh?
Okay. Then the Smiths talked to their neighbors.
So you're the young couple that's taken over Lowe's Cottage? Well, there's a story about that cottage, you know.
The Smiths soon found out that everyone else in town seemed to know about the tragic history of Lowe's Cottage, except for them. During the 1860s, a milkmaid named Elaine Herring lived in the cottage with her lover, Joseph Phillips. The Smiths checked the town records and discovered that, indeed, the young couple really had existed. Elaine was murdered by her employer and died in the cellar of Lowe's Cottage, which is now the kitchen. When Joseph Phillips heard about Elaine's death, he hung himself in despair, or so the story goes.
The cottage isn't haunted. The cottage has no reputation in Upper Mayfield of being haunted, or in Ashbourne for that matter. It's all untrue. There's no record whatsoever of Elaine Herring and Josie Phillips ever living at Lowe's Cottage.
Then local newspapers began writing stories about the hauntings. As a result, the bank refused to refinance their house, saying that the publicity had decreased the home's value. So the Smiths filed a lawsuit against Susan Melbourne and Sandra Podmore.
Had we known any of this, any of it at all, we wouldn't have bought the place, we wouldn't have steered clear of it. We should have been given the choice. If anybody had bought our house instead of us with a weak heart, I'm sure it would have killed them.
The two sisters thought that the whole thing was ridiculous.
Absolute rubbish. Nothing happened at Lowe's Cottage. Mr. and Mrs. Smith have come up with this story about the ghosts to try and get out of paying.
I'll set this one up here, can you set yours up there? I'll put this one over here.
The Smiths hired two paranormal investigators to videotape their home. They'd hoped to get evidence to support their case. The investigators used a night vision camera and placed two candles to capture evidence of a haunting. Suddenly, the lower candle tumbled down the stairs, and the other candle flew through the air.
We was, well, literally scared to death. We didn't know what to think, what to do, but you just definitely got the presence that there was somebody with you. They're definitely not imagining it, because we've had the experience ourselves.
We definitely believe that they should have told us the house is haunted. We have got to tell people, if anybody, should anybody in their right mind want to buy our house, we have got to tell them what has happened and the fact that it's haunted. And I think the same should apply to them.
Update. The court battle went on for years. Finally, the arguments concluded and the English judge reached a verdict. In less than 5 minutes, he ruled against the Smiths. He concluded that the unearthly happenings were most likely the work of a person and not a ghost. Since then, there have been no reported ghostly sightings.